go. This is Ranger Kidwell-Ross, editor of WorldSweeper.com and the director of the World Sweeping Association. And today I have a mixed pleasure to have as an interview. We'll be interviewing Mike Higgins, and the mixed pleasure comes in that Mike is leaving, and good for him. He is stepping back from his position as vice president and general manager of Elgin Sweeper. And it has been a wonderful experience to have been around Mike for the 11 plus years that he's been the general manager, when we've had a lot of conversations and exchanged a lot of information, as is correct. It should be done with the leading sweeping resource in the world, with the leading sweeper manufacturer in America. So Mike has been with the Elgin company for over 35 years, and Ranger has been in the power sweeping industry for just over 35 years. So we're very matched there, and Mike is giving me my encouragement, I guess, at arm's length to, if he's going to retire, I should be able to as well. He looks better going into that retirement than I do, but you take it as you can get it. So with that, Mike, if you would be so kind, welcome to your what might be called an exit interview with WorldSweeper, and I look forward to providing to the entire industry some ideas of the changes that have gone through in our industry since 1987-ish, when we both got started, and where we are today and that sort of thing. So first off, thanks for being here, and I look forward to learning what I'm going to learn from you today too.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ranger. I really appreciate it, and definitely appreciate all the years we've been working together on all kinds of things sweeper related. So glad to be here.
Well, when you started, just to set the scene on my side, I started as a consultant for the Schwartz family, who had Schwartz Industries. They did not have any street sweepers. They had a good market market share for their parking lot sweepers, but just nothing on the street side at all, and so forth. What was it like at Elgin when you started with them, and what kind of position did you come in with?
Yeah, so I came in as really a manufacturing engineer, management trainee. I had interned at another division of Federal Signal the prior summer, and that's kind of how I got my connection into Elgin when I graduated from grad school. So I came in that position, and yeah, things were very, very different, both on the shop floor as well as with the equipment compared to today. I would say, we'll take the shop floor as a start. A lot of, we're doing a lot of the same work today, but it's done with a lot better, more automated equipment, much more efficient equipment than we did back then. Back then, we would take a raw piece of steel and shear it to a blank size, and then move that over to a punch machine to try to punch out the holes or the configuration we need. Then we take it over to a manual brake press and bend it into position. And then a lot of times then you have to take it over to a deburring machine to smooth the edges out and all that. And then it would, it would get stored in a rack until it was needed to go into a weldment. And then, it would get welded together, and then on through to assembly. And back then we actually would assemble the machines complete in a prime painted condition, and then do a finish paint job after the entire machine was finished. And so we would be painting everything, including hydraulic hoses and the engine, and that's just how we did it back then. And today, obviously, it's a whole lot different. That same process is all done on a laser cut. You're eliminating several operations, and then we pre-paint, powder paint all the piece parts, and then assemble together a painted machine. So it's looks much nicer. The paint's more durable. Everything just goes together much better. So definitely a lot different. Shop was a lot louder back then. You can imagine shearing these big blank pieces of steel, and they come crashing down onto a rack, and it was just it was loud, dusty, noisy. A lot better work environment today out there in the shop for sure.
Well, looking back on those times, I recall some of that was happening in the short shop, and they weren't as big or of the stature as the Elgin machines that you had to build. Um, what and let's go to the other side of that. Now you've got a built machine. How do you sell it? Is there a difference in the dealer network? You had dealers at the time. We didn't, the internet was in its infancy. There wasn't really, I don't think there was a website. Well, actually, I'm quite sure there wasn't a website because I built the first one for the sweeping industry for Schwartz. I remember calling Mark Schwartz and saying, have you heard of this thing called the internet? And he said, yeah, I think I've heard something about that. I said, how about websites? Have you heard anything about websites? And he said, no, I haven't heard anything about that. And I said, well, I think I'm bringing you late to the game because I understand there's 100,000 of these website things that are out there. And so we ended up, well, he said what he always said is, what's it going to cost me? And I ended up, buying Schwartz.com and building a website. But before that, a lot of people listening to this, are not pre-internet type people. So it was more time intensive to sell equipment and to get people up to speed on what they were going to buy, or the differences between the different kind of sweepers that were available with you. What was that process with the dealers back then, would you say?
Yeah, so they weren't able to do online research on things like they are able to do today, and it's not just today, it's been around for a while now. So back then, their sources of information were largely reliant on a dealer salesperson or attending a national or local trade show, and gathering up literature, and then calling their local dealer representative with questions, and then asking for a demonstration. And that part of it is still on the table. I would say very few sweepers today are sold without an actual demonstration, unless the customer is just reordering what they already have. And even in those cases, a lot of times you still have to do a demonstration and a presentation. So a lot of the foundation and basics that are there in the dealer network still are there today, and a big requirement and very important to the whole process. But the customers today, they can research all kinds of things and zero in on what they think they want, at least at the start. And it takes a lot of that first step away. But a lot of times we have to guide them still and say, just because you did this online research doesn't mean that there isn't things we can add and questions we can ask you that say, are you sure you think you need this, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And sometimes we end up guiding them into a different sweeper for a different application they weren't thinking of. So that part, I think it's been good. A lot of that upfront research can get done and makes the sales process go a little faster, but we still have to do, the fundamentals on the demonstration and the presentation.
Well, I think the buying public, which in your case is a lot of public works directors and airports and large governmental agencies, I think they're up to speed a lot faster, and are more aware of what's available with you, and out there. Their questions can be better, faster, and so forth. The difficulty, as we've seeing it more and more, I think, is differentiation. How do you differentiate your equipment from other equipment? And my to look at that part a little deeper, I'm currently in conversation with the South Coast Air Quality Management District to talk about that testing process that is so vaunted as being a PM10 certification, but in fact had only 10% of the material on the ground was PM10s, and the threshold for passing was 80% pickup. So you could leave all the PM10s on the ground and still get certified. And to my knowledge, all makes and all manufacturers of sweepers and models of sweepers that have ever tested found a way to pass. So uh, I think that it's more and more difficult to differentiate yourself. And I believe Elgin has been very proactive in that field. You've hired Roger Sutherland, a noted sweeper researcher, to see what your equipment can do. And in terms of talking about what's the changes are in equipment, what he found was that your broom sweepers, even are much better than what was there in the National Urban Runoff protocols that were back before either of our times, and really hamstrung the sweeping industry because the results were not very good. They didn't really know what they were doing in testing the sweepers and so forth. But talk about if you would, talk about the quality and ability to pick up of the air sweepers, but also of your broom sweeper line that is certainly better than it was back in the, shall we say, old days.
Yeah, that whole subject around testing and pickup percentage and then air quality, that's really a tough thing to measure. We found over the years, I mean, I'm going back many years, we worked closely with the city of Madison, Wisconsin on some of that stuff, and our belief is there's a need for both mechanical and air vacuum in most applications. And the mechanicals are definitely better at and more efficient at picking up the bulk heavier debris, getting it off the street. And you've got to get that off the street as well as the fines if you're really wanting to have a positive effect on both air and water quality with the stormwater runoff. So all of our engineering focus and development focus is making sure that we're being as efficient as we can with whatever model we have. And then our philosophy is we want to offer all types that are needed and really try to guide the customer into the right the right sweeper for their application. And sometimes it's more than one type of sweeper. In many cases it is, especially if they can afford to have more than one sweeper if they're big enough. So we do that. We've developed over the years the ability to control dust without water with our waterless configurations available. We've gone into on the electric side now, most recently with hybrid models, and then we most recently introduced a full electric model. So we're trying to always be on the forefront of what's needed and wanted in the marketplace, but always keeping an eye on the performance. We don't want to compromise on what that sweeper is really intended to do, and that's to get as much of that debris off of the street, out of the air, and keeping it out of the water. That's the goal. That's what our customer's goal always is. And then the byproduct of all that is that the street looks nice, right? It looks clean, and it's a nice aesthetic thing, but really we're trying to keep all that stuff out of the air and water.
Well, that's right. And there was at least one study I know we reported on that, and it's been back when I founded American Sweeper magazine in the 90s, and this is back with an article that was in that, and it showed that the most efficient way to use a sweeping at the time, street sweeping, in this case, if you were really looking to get as much of that stormwater runoff pollutants out of the waste stream as you could, was to do tandem sweeping. And there's a number of government agencies and so forth that today do tandem sweeping as well. For those who might not know this, only about 10% of the material on a city street is considered to be a PM10, or excuse me, a PM250 or smaller. Now, our hair, to show you how small PM10 is, our hair is figured to be about 72 microns wide. So about 3 times that, a little more, is 250 microns. So 3 times the width of your hair, only 10% of the material on the street that needs to be picked up is that. But for reasons of physics, up to 60% of the pollutant load that the EPA is trying to get rid of out of the runoff and out of the air it can be in that 10%. So that's the challenge. And the tandem sweeping showed that at the time, they took broom sweepers, ran that, and then basically right behind that ran air sweeper, and they were able to pick up about 500 pounds of material per curb mile. And it was all basically small micron material. So that's the challenge that you're talking about. And thank goodness the broom sweepers do a better job these days, because it's so tough for a place like, let's go back up to Madison, where they have a huge storm load problem in the spring cleanup in the spring. So that you have to have broom sweepers for that. You're never going to pick up tire casings and mufflers and those kinds of things with an air sweeper, as far as I can figure out. So you have to have that. But then once you're done with that, there's really a lot of impetus to keep going with those broom sweepers, because we own them. And the general public is not going to really know the difference because it looks clean and so forth. So I really applaud Elgin for its improvements on the broom side, and I know the results that Roger Sutherland was able to come up with showed extraordinary increase in the ability of the Elgin broom sweepers too. And I think it was the broom bear that he studied. I don't recall that right offhand, but we've got to somehow get to that. And appropriately, you're talking about the going dustless. I mean, sweepers are every day taking hundreds of thousands of gallons of perfectly good potable water and mixing it up with dirt and taking it off to a landfill someplace. So where do you see the future of that? Do you think we can ever get to the holy grail of dustless and air and broom put together, so that the machine that'll do it all, shall we say? Do you see any of that on the horizon?
Anything's possible. I think it's a a street sweeper design is a nice engineering challenge, if you will, because the requirements of a street sweeper are, you can't have an infinitely long wheelbase, because you need to be able to maneuver this thing on city streets, and it has to be legal from a weight standpoint. So you've got, something that's carrying, a lot of weight just with all the components on it. And then you're filling it up with material, which is making the truck heavier. And if you're carrying water on board, that has to be factored in. And so you've got to balance all this weight with as short a wheelbase as possible. And then you got to power all this somehow. And so what's the power? Is it a battery now with an electric? But up until now, it's been an internal combustion engine, diesel or CNG or whatever. And so all of that has to be balanced, and then how much power is required to do all that. So for a mechanical sweeper, you're turning a conveyor system and brooms. For an air sweeper, you're turning a big impeller or turbine fan to create the vacuum. So to combine that into one sweeper and keep the wheelbase tight and keep the weight balanced, that's an engineering challenge, no doubt. And like I said, anything's possible. That could be coming as things continue to get more efficient. I think where everything's been headed in the last, since I've been here, but in probably more accelerated in the last 10 years, is everybody wants to do more with less. And, back in the day, horsepower was cheap, and it was just very easy to just, the industry was kind of going in a direction of my dog's bigger than your dog, and let's just put more horsepower on there. put more water on board, put a bigger hopper on there, put bigger brooms. It just bigger, 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 bigger. And lately it's been, people are taking a fresh look at that and saying, well, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And we don't necessarily want bigger. We don't necessarily need bigger. We want to be able to do more with less. We want to be more efficient. And the move toward electrification is forcing us to really take a hard look at that stuff and analyze the power requirements for what we're doing. And you want to be able to do it with the least amount of power possible, because you need that battery power to be conserved so you can get through a full shift and you can still sweep as effectively as you did with the old diesel engine. So you know, air and mechanical combined sweeper, I think there's some small versions of that out there right now, but I don't think at the moment that's not, it may not be on a lot of folks' radar because of what I said about the challenges of having all that stuff on board.
Yeah, certainly, certainly a difficult challenge. Are you seeing any difference in the demonstrations now? You're talking about, bigger is better, kind of stuff. When I was out, and just, truth in interview here, I was essentially directed Schwartz Industries marketing for 10 years when the family owned it. We'd go out to demonstrations of their street level equipment, and the wherever you're demoing, they would just put as much material on the ground. You couldn't believe how much was there. There'd be about a foot of debris they'd put down
Right.
and see who left the least, I guess is the way I'd put it. Are they do you feel like the industry is getting as sophisticated as they should be in terms of putting down small material and recognizing that the pollutants are in the small stuff, and yes, you have to get the gravel and pebbles and that sort of things too, but as much of that small as you can get is really to cover your stormwater phase 1, phase 2 permit requirements. You seeing any difference in what they're doing for demos?
To be honest, not a lot. Probably a small percentage of the demos are the take a dump truck, dump it all out in a short area and just run it through. There's some of that still goes on, which is fine. We actually like to do those demos because we generally perform pretty well in those. But really, a good demo is the customer running it for half a day on their actual streets and really seeing what it does, and what they normally have to sweep versus that environment, which is probably not reflective of what they sweep day to day. We probably see more of that on the demonstration side where they, take it on their own streets for a few hours and make sure it does what they need it to do. But it's, that's really a customer choice, how they want to evaluate your sweeper. And a lot of times you don't have a lot of input into that. We try to give them input at times, but at the end of the day, they want to see it do whatever they want to see it do. We'll accommodate that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd like to see I wish I could hear you saying, "Oh yes, public works directors are now widely affiliated with their stormwater counterparts as teams, and so they recognize the fact that what sweepers need to get the small micron debris as well as the big stuff and so forth." But I haven't seen that either.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough thing to measure in a demo anyway. I think it's the work that you've done with the Florida study and then the Minnesota study and continuing to get that word out there about how street sweeping is, by far the most cost-effective way of controlling your stormwater runoff, and I forget the numbers now. It's like 7, 8 times,
yeah,
five times less expensive.
Yeah.
And I think that word is getting out. it's not out there as much as any of us in the sweeping industry would like it to be, but it is getting out there. And, guys like you and what we can do on our promotional side and our counterparts in the industry, the word is getting out there, and that's going to be good for everyone, not only for the sweeping industry, but it's just good for everyone to make the environment cleaner, right? So
Right.
we got to keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully it'll continue to permeate through the country.
Well, stormwater has rules now that where they're collecting money from typically garbage pickup, and so they end up with budgets that are being misutilized in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Because they're not recognizing how much more should be thrown at their sweeping um, side of it, rather than. I mean, there's a lot of people out there selling catch basin filters and all manner of storm drain stuff, and the fact of the matter is it just makes more sense to pick this material up before it gets away from you, before it runs off.
Yeah. I mean, even back years ago, we with the Madison study and some others that we kind of did on our own that aren't really things that are publishable, but the frequency of sweeping, even if you've swept the street and wow, it looks pretty clean, but you keep sweeping it even though it looks clean. And even with mechanical sweepers, you are making a big impact on the runoff and on the air quality. If you have a program that is just regimented and doing it more frequently is a big help.
I recall when I was first around the street sweeping side of it, and then essentially I started with the Schwartz family when they bought their first streets class company, which was called Aplex.
Yeah,
And
I remember.
yeah, and what I found when I got involved with that side of it and the public works side is that at the time, a big rainstorm would be coming, and so they'd say, "Well, gee, we don't have to sweep because the rain's going to just wash all that debris away, and so great, we take the day off," kind of thing. And I think today even there's not enough, um, I guess, education and recognition that if you're going to have a huge rainstorm, maybe you need to put all of your sweepers out there to pick it up before that rain comes and keep it out of your water system. Um, and of
Yeah,
course,
I was gonna say, back then nobody was thinking about, you know, or not much thought was going into the stormwater runoff and controlling that. Sweeping was really just to keep the streets looking nice or as nice as you can. I think, in a lot of cases, that's still the main driver of sweepers. Keep the city looking clean. Uh, so uh, having that motivation as a primary to keep it out of the water stream is and people are thinking that way more now for sure. I think that's a good thing.
yeah, it's tough to teach that, and as I tell people, it's difficult to tell someone, a public works director that is looking at a filthy street with all manner of stuff on it, that what they need to get up is as small as 3 times the width of your hair. That's the important stuff, and the more so than the cardboard boxes or the rocks.
Yeah, but you got to get it all because you're
Gotta
not
get
you
it
can't
all. That's
you
it.
can't pick your way through, and a lot of times that small stuff is bound up with adhering to the large stuff. So
Yeah,
you got to get it all.
and that's the challenge. And as you say, it used to be bigger's better, and that's what we want. Is it's a bragging right if you had, I guess, bigger sweepers. But one of the drivers for that today is clearly that you can't get CDL drivers, operators very well. They're more expensive. They're hard to keep track of. You can lose one and suddenly your sweeper's down, rather than if you have something like Elgin's Broom Badger that doesn't require CDL, and you lose an operator, you can jump in it, or somebody can jump in it and do the job. So I think that's a driver for the smaller as well. Plus, everything's getting more crowded.
Yeah, we've seen a huge move towards non-CDL sweepers in the past 2 years. I think the state recreational marijuana laws are driving that, because the CDL license is still a national requirement for drug testing, and so it's that's causing the more difficulty getting and keeping the CDL drivers. So we've, not only the Broom Badger, of course, our Pelican is always, that's not a CDL truck, but then we've designed the Broom Bear and the Regen X are both available in non-CDL platforms because of that. And I would say, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but a large percentage of those two models that are really full-size sweepers come in the non-CDL format.
Mhm. Yeah, that's for those reasons. It's plus the cities are more crowded and so forth now too, so smaller is not going to hurt. And it's interesting that there's so many configurations out there of from dumping on the ground and letting something else pick it up to dumping into to trucks, dump trucks that are accompanying to, there used to be a lot of screening that's I don't think is happening anymore. And it's certainly not talked about as much. To screen your debris. Um, it's have you seen a drop in that, or are you seeing more of it? I'm just not aware of, or are more cities screening their sweeping debris when it comes in, as far as you know?
I'm not sure about that. I do know that the practice of dumping on the ground is definitely there's definitely a lot less of that than there was years ago. You know, part of why our Regen X is the standard configuration allows you to dump into a container. So you don't have to dump on the ground with that one. And of course, all the sweepers that have the full high dump capabilities to go in a truck or anywhere in between the ground and a truck. Screening, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I don't hear a lot about screening debris, so my guess is not a lot of that's happening.
Yeah, I would agree. Or we between us, we'd have heard more about it.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things that's certainly right on the horizon, actually two of them, one's AI and one's autonomous sweeping. I have an article that will be, I believe, in the May issue. It was actually ready last month, but I had too much material to include it. But I believe it's a city called Shenzhen in China. China appears to be ahead of the United States or anyone else in terms of autonomous sweeping and other things. But this is a system where this autonomous sweeper is assigned to big restroom kind of area where they have a lot of debris and litter. You may have read that, being up on your reading too. But so it cleans up around the area, dumps and plugs itself back in and can do that. There's another parking lot sweeper that is on the horizon that can go and be placed in a place just kind of like a robo-vac, and can allegedly sweep up to 100,000 square feet a day, and go dump and go plug itself back in and do that kind of autonomously. And we're seeing a lot of that in the trucking industry now, where there's tests all over the place for long haul trucking to be autonomous. How do you see that working into sweeping?
It's moving fast. I think definitely the parking lot sweeping application is going to be it's most suited to that to start. So I think that's where we'll see it, happen first. There's already, as you mentioned, already some activity happening that with, prototypes and test machines in that environment. As the technology develops, I think eventually it could or would migrate into normal street sweeping. I think, that may be more of a parallel and after it being more commonplace in just passenger vehicles, but certainly the technology is heading that way. I don't know that I'll see it in my lifetime, as a commonplace on a regular street sweeper, but you never know how fast this stuff moves. It could happen.
Yeah, it certainly is happening, pretty quickly, when you take a long view of it. Over the course of, say, the last 5 years, there've been a lot of movement toward that. Is it too early to tell how artificial intelligence is going to interact with developing sweepers, designing sweepers, building them, any of that? Uh, that's certainly on the really on the news headlines all the time today. But have you seen anything along those lines yet?
I would say in the building of the sweepers, I know of some things that are potentially, going to be on the docket for us. As an example, you know, um, you know, the paint systems today can really, there can be some automation that's fueled by artificial intelligence where, you know, you can, it can, the paint system can read the whole geometry of the part and making sure that the automated painter is getting paint everywhere it needs to go, as an example. Um, you know, some of the laser cutting equipment we have is really on the verge of that type of intelligence as well at this point. There's some automation around loading and unloading, and in fact, where um, we'd be able to what we call run machines lights out. That's available today, and we're looking hard at that type of technology where you can load up enough work where when the plant is closed and empty and nobody's here, those machines are still running parts for us. So um, it's definitely coming at us, and we're on the forefront of looking at all that stuff.
Well, if you don't, and competitors are, of course, that's the American way, and certainly now the more worldwide way,
Yeah.
as well. I've been intrigued that for a number of years I put out an April Fool's little article about this, that, or the other thing, and one of them was about a sweeper that had a solar panel on it, and as the sweeper went along, the solar panel picked up power and so forth. Well, that happened, and it happened in China. We did one of the that I showed the picture of a sweeper mounted on the side of a rocket, like going up with the space shuttle, and to clean debris in space. Well, now that's happening too. There's a product going out there that is designed to sweep up in space, that it seems like if we can conceive it, suddenly it happens, or maybe not so suddenly, but it certainly happens. What's your vision of in terms of the industry? Give us some predictions. I know that's a dicey thing to ask you for, but what are your predictions for the next 5, 10, or 20 years in the industry? What do you think we're going to see in that time frame?
Well, the theme of doing more with less is going to permeate any innovation. Everybody is trying to do that. Resources are limited. Labor is tougher to get and keep, and so to be able to do the job the same or better as today with less, using less fuel, using less power, using less water, doing it faster. So doing the same job in 5 hours, it used to take 8 hours. That's what's really going to drive everything. What comes out of that, I don't know. Right now it seems like, the whole electrification initiative is really consuming a lot of, at least here, it's consuming a lot of our development work. It's like I said, it's an engineering challenge on a street sweeper to get all of that all of that packaged into a design that, still meets the requirements that are needed on a sweeper with wheelbase and weight distribution and that sort of thing. The battery technology is going to be big, as the battery technology on these electric sweepers gets more efficient and you can store more power on a smaller, lighter battery. That's going to really help with that whole design challenge. And I think what we're seeing, and we've talked about this here as we've been developing our hybrid sweepers and now our full electric, is the design changes we're going to need to be able to do on this equipment. We're going to have to do it 10 times faster than we ever had to before. In the past, when we were just mounting a diesel engine on a sweeper, and that diesel engine, that design didn't change much year to year. Over, occasionally they would come up with this and then this or that, and then emission packages might change. But now there's battery technology, how fast it's moving. And when I say a battery, it's a package. It's a whole package. It's not just the battery. There's a whole temperature control system that's required on these battery systems, and so those evolve. And then as the battery gets smaller, now we can put it in a smaller package. So it's forcing us to be much more adaptable here on the design side, and being ready to be able to adapt our sweeper designs to accommodate how fast this industry is moving, comparatively to what the street sweeper industry has been in the past, which is relatively slow.
Yeah, no question. I think that's good stuff. I recently rode an electric bicycle for the first time, and I'm not much of a bicycle rider. I don't like those hills. Yes, I can gut it up the hills. I don't want to. So I have
Well, you live in a hilly place out there in the Northwest, so
I do, and so instead, I've had a 1500 cc Kawasaki Vulcan motorcycle, but I'm being won over by the electric bike because it's so quiet. You can go up any hill you want. I went 15 miles of lots of hilly the other day with a group of people, and it was really my first ride out, and I was amazed at the difference. And so we've had so much trouble with diesel engines in terms of, clearly our little industry here of sweeping was not considered when they had the new diesel engines that, had to regenerate all the time, and are really bothered by slow speeds that sweepers go. So from that, there's been a blowback back to gasoline sweepers. And now I think that movement is clearly going off the other direction, as the world seems to be with electrification, and we'll see how that part goes. One of the problems that I see in the long run with that, and maybe people will just get used to it, is it's so much more expensive for electric vehicles, whether they're electric sweepers or whatever they are. Um, I saw something come in from, it might have been Missoula, Montana, the other day, and forgive me, folks, if you're from Montana and I'm getting this wrong, but they bought an electric sweeper, and they were touting about the fact that they had this great electric sweeper that they had bought. Well, diesel sweepers today, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but we're looking at $250,000 basically for, does that seem about right? 200,000.
that would be on a very low end for a truck mounted. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So $250,000 and above, let's say, for that. And so they were talking, about the sweeper they had gotten, and it was somewhere like $650,000-700,000. But the fact was that they had gotten a grant for that when you read the fine print, and so it cost them $160,000 was their out-of-pocket expense. So I can see why they would be very attracted to that electric sweeper, or any electric sweeper, if you can do that. What happens? I can't help but wonder when, the shine comes off and the grants aren't available, and diesels are not going to be available starting in California in the foreseeable future. So that's a difficult. We contrast that with what you just said about we have to do more with less, and so forth. But as we move into electrified, cost of doing business goes up in terms of purchasing. In terms of operation, not so much.
Yeah, you know, the battery systems are very expensive. You know, I don't know, like other high tech industries, if, over time those prices and costs come down quickly, like a lot of electronics over the years, you see that maybe that'll happen with batteries, and it'll settle down with regards to the application in a sweeper. But yeah, they're very expensive. So um, hopefully that happens before, engines aren't allowed to be produced anymore. But the other thing I'm concerned about on the electric side is the grid capacity and the infrastructure requirements that have to be put into place to support charging these batteries. And a lot of cities kind of get a rude awakening when they investigate that. And depending on how many pieces of equipment they want to be able to charge up, it's quite a big project and can be quite costly. And then the local area grid may or may not be suited to support all of that. So I think there's a bit of the cart ahead of the horse with these regulations, and that's not unprecedented with a lot of things that have been, in that regard. But hopefully cooler heads will prevail and they'll get things timed up right, because what we don't want to have happen is people not buying equipment and not sweeping the streets.
Right.
That would be the worst thing to happen.
Yeah, or being able to buy them in sufficient quantities. And that's why I think it's so important that the stormwater community get on board with understanding the extraordinary cost effectiveness of street sweeping. If you want to remove pollutants, if you're interested in that, if it's not just cosmetic, then
Right.
and you're throwing stormwater side money at reducing your runoff, then recognize that sweeping has been shown conclusively with a combined broom and air sweeping. By the way, I fault both the Minnesota and Florida study for not separating out their broom and their air sweepers to see who was doing a better job. They didn't know enough about sweeping to do that. They could have easily done it. But to see that if you're trying to get rid of nitrogen and you're trying to get rid of phosphorus, then it's 500% more cost effective to do that with sweeping than it is at the end of the pipe. So come on, let's do it. And if we looked at the pollutants across the board we're trying to get rid of, about half of those are water soluble. So if it's water soluble and it washes off, it's going to go right through your filter. It's not going to matter what kind of filter.
Right.
So, I really hope that I'm toward the end of my tenure as well, and I hope that the industry can find somebody that steps up with an interest in the water quality and the environment that I have, which is the reason, by the way, that I got into this. Why I founded American Sweeper magazine in the first place is I knew enough about sweepers now, and I moved away from Alabama, was in Bellingham, Washington. I went up to the public works to say, hey, what kind of sweepers do you use? What do you do? And I learned that, excuse me, they had a great deal going because they had a low spot in the brother-in-law of the public works director's backyard out and so they were dumping all their sweeping out there to fill this hole. Not something you should be doing. And I asked about catch basins, and they said, well, yeah, we had a kind of a low budget. And so now it's been 2.5 years since we've been able to clean our catch basins because now we tested the material. It's so toxic, we can't dispose of it locally. We have to drive it better part of an hour to Everett, Washington, where they have a facility you can do that. So they were just letting this material run right out into Bellingham Bay. And I thought, and then did some more research, and I found, public works directors still think they're cleaning up horse poop. They're not cleaning up brake linings and clutch plates and this other nasty stuff that comes off. And in fact, to provide a little info on my side of things, I know coming up, there was just an award for studying street sweeping's effect on plastics and microplastics. It's being done in Southern California, and I'll be publishing that. That award has just happened. There's now increased look at tire material and what's coming off tires. And people replace their tires, and nobody really thinks, where does all that material go? And as I'm prone to say, people talk about throwing things away, and there is no away. When I did the research on doing a microplastics article, one of the things that one of the professionals reminded me was that the first piece of plastic ever made is still here. So, we have to see what our industry can do to be the most effective we can do. That Army be all we can be kind of slogan to do the impact that power sweeping has been shown statistically to be able to do. Now, how is that? That's the challenge, I think, for Elgin and everybody else, is to transmit that information across the board and show that can be done. And Elgin is certainly positioned, I think, to do that. And I hope when the person that is coming along behind you for your position probably will look at this. I really want to, put that in their thought processes, is how do you position Elgin to keep being at the forefront of the environmental aspect of sweeping, and you're certainly positioned to be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Extremely important to the industry and extremely important to Elgin Sweeper Company.
What is it we should have covered here that we didn't? We're coming on to our hour of conversation. Time flies when you're having a good time, and I'm amazed that's we've got that it's been an hour. But that's always the way it is. You and I get on the phone with each other. It's hard to hang up on
Yeah.
one end or the other.
Yeah.
Anything we should have talked about here that you'd like to bring out, or do you have any kind of a closing argument, so to speak?
Well, if I may, I'd like to just going back, kind of saying thanks to a couple folks from my career that brought me along, and I think one name you probably are familiar with is Roger Parsons, who his family were him and his father Chet were majority owners of Elgin Sweeper Company for many years, going back I think into the 1940s, and then in 1982 they sold to Federal Signal. But when I started in 1987, I was fortunate enough to have Roger Parsons take me under his wing, if you will. Was a great mentor, and really gave me the experience in all facets of the business early on, and then I went into the field to learn the market side of the business, and then there was another gentleman by the name of Bill Garber, who was the president and owner of McQueen Equipment Group, which was in Minnesota at the time, and now they own dealerships throughout the Midwest. And both of those gentlemen have passed away, unfortunately, but both of those guys were just pioneers in the street sweeping industry, and just great people. And really, I owe a lot of my success in my career to those two guys, who were just great mentors to me. So I appreciate the opportunity to let me acknowledge those two great guys.
Well, you bet. And I didn't know Mr. Garber, but Roger Parsons is one of those people that I've never heard a negative word said about that man. He was just truly an icon, not only in his industry and the many industry. I mean, he dabbled, or he had a lot of interests, but he was just a credit to whatever he put his hand to. And boy, I'm glad to hear that name brought up, because he was certainly an icon for many, many years.
Yep. Yeah, he was. Thank you for that.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed this. I think it'll be fun for our readers, watchers, listeners to be able to take a look at this, and I think it's good to have it, for posterity as well. I'm interested and intrigued at what this might look like. This interview might go down as 10 years from now or 20 years from now, in terms of, we are at the beginning, I think, uh, of the industry in terms of its real capability of stormwater handling. And I think there's no reason the industry shouldn't increase by 4 or 5-fold once that's really truly embraced. And I think it'll get less expensive for the industry to address stormwater runoff pollution and air quality at that point too. So you've
Yeah,
been,
I hope so.
yeah, you've certainly made your mark, and Elgin has remained at the front and more under your tenure. So good for you. As they say in Australia, good on you, Mike.
Well, thank you so much, Ranger. Again, thank you for all your contributions to the industry, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today. It's been fun.
Certainly been my pleasure. Thanks.
All right, take care.